All right, so real quickly, talking about transitioning and when to pull fuelings out or leave them in and just add to them. Now, I'm a big advocate of just leaving the fuelings in there and adding additional food to them because I just find it so simple and so easy. But if you decide that you're going from a 5-1 to a 4-2 to a 3-3, which is one of the most popular and most recommended ways to do it, then you will be walked through in the transition guide when to pull out certain fuelings and bring back in the choices of additional calories that we talked about. But here again, if you're tracking in MyFitnessPal or your .fit planner, then you're going to be so ahead of the game because you're going to be able to dial it in a lot more detail without just having that guesswork. So, but what I wanted to show you here was if I decide that I'm pulling out a fueling and I'm getting rid of 11 grams of protein and 14 grams of carbs and roughly 2 grams of fat, then as I'm increasing my calories, what that might look like is I'm going to add another 11 grams of protein, for example, but let's say 22 grams of protein total, 30 grams of carbs, and 9 grams of fat for that particular meal. That's about 289 calories, just to give you a reference. The macros on that is a 30, 42, 30, which actually is really cool. I mean, I like the macros on that. And that's going to work out just fine if that's your goal, is to take away a fueling and add additional calories on top of that. However, if I'm keeping that fueling in, that could look something like this, where for me personally, I'll keep the fueling for the carbohydrates and for the emotional thing that I feel like I'm having more carbohydrates than I really am. So whether that's my buttermilk biscuit, my brownie, or even any one of my fuel bars, okay? That's something that's something that I use as an emotional tool so that I don't have to have 30, 40 grams of carbohydrates and I can stay in a high performance fat burn type of model. So what I might do with this is I might add some healthy fats to one of my fuelings. And a typical one would be adding a tablespoon of coconut oil to my brownie after it's been microwaved, okay? The protein is I may also add additional protein to supply my lean body mass requirements for that. And that's an interesting topic just based on if you're taking amino boost or not. That may or may not be necessary. So it just depends on where you are in the overall spectrum of everything else. But with this, it's not uncommon for me to have a buttermilk biscuit, add a little bit of steak, and then obviously the steak is both fat and protein in that case. But that might be a meal for me instead of having a traditional fueling, but I'm going to add a little bit of protein and a little bit of fat to that to start getting into closer to my performance mode or closer into my TEE if my goal is to maintain. Okay, now, where did I want to go with that? I think I had an important thing I wanted to say. Oh, this. If you're no longer in fat burn and you don't require the benefits of being in a pure fat burn, then if your carbohydrates are higher and your protein is higher, there's no ceiling. Like literally, you could do 1 gram per pound of body weight on your protein, and you could even go higher than that. There's no issues with that as long as it fits in your total caloric need for the day. Okay? Same thing with carbohydrates. Other than controlling appetite, there's no ceiling if you decide that you're not in a fat burn, as long as you're getting your other macronutrients into the minimal levels that would be required for just general health. So I think that's a really important thing for people to understand, is like when you're in a fat burn, there's a ceiling in both protein and in carbohydrates to maintain a good fat burn, or know when to time it appropriately and what the ups and downs would be of timing your carbohydrates during an exercise mode for staying in a fat burn slightly after that overall that overall exercise. Okay, but for the average person, keep this in mind. If you're no longer in fat burn, this even qualifies you, like you have more carbs than the threshold that allows you to have all the benefits that you would experience with fat burn. There is no ceiling. If you wanted to do, like if you were restricted before to 90 grams of protein, you can now do 190 if it fits your caloric needs. Okay? I want to be very clear because there's so many diets out there that will talk about extra protein or even extra carbs, maybe extra fats, whatever. It depends on the metabolic system, the operating system that you're using. And once that operating system is established, if that's where you want to stay, you just need to know the parameters in order to make that happen. Okay, so hopefully that was some clarification in that regard. So, guys, you know what to do.